The recording is now on. I'd like to invite everyone to turn their camera on if they're comfortable and the bandwidth permits. I also suggest that you may want to turn the together mode on so that we can all be together in a virtual room. Just remember that if you change the scenery, it'll change the scenery for everyone. So that was just something that I like to remind people. I'd like to remind people of. So the purpose of today's meeting was for us to review the was for us to go ahead and review the suggestions that Sharif had sent us, as well as review the last comments that we had from the staff representatives as a collective, because there was what I called proposals number 1, which we had not yet had the time to discuss. Our colleagues from Nairobi, both Maite and Rosemary, are saying that they have connection issues and they will not be turning their cameras on today, as otherwise they will get kicked out of the meeting, and we completely understand. And they've put that information in the chat for everyone to see. So I just have one quick question of housekeeping. Have all the staff representatives, you've received a copy of the notes. Will you be making any comments? Because it would be helpful for me to know, because I'd like to I want to put them on the SharePoint site, and I wanted to include that in this week's letter. But if you need more time, I also understand that as well. It's just for planning purposes. Karina says she's okay with the notes as they are. What about other colleagues? Maite, Sharif, Laura, Doris? Doris has asked for the floor.
Yes, Mish, are you referring, when you say notes, are you referring to the summary records that were sent to us? Okay.
Yes.
Yes. No issues with them.
Okay.
Okay.
So Vienna has no concerns, and then Laura?
No concerns.
Laura has no concerns either. Sharif?
Yes, regarding the point we were talking about last time concerning that sometimes the staff do not have work for certain hours, and this will affect the performance at the new mandate. I have fresh information from our...
Okay, hold on a second. I will write that down in my notes that you have something that you would like to discuss about fresh information. My question, Sharif, is with respect to the notes, the summary notes of the meetings that took place last week, can I go ahead and circulate them, or did you have any comments?
I find that they are excellent, actually. Thank you for all these efforts. Yeah.
Well, our colleague Robert, I think, is present with us today, and so I think that he has heard our comments. And Nicholas Diaz has also joined us today, and he will be helping with the notes for this week. So then I just make a note on my to-do list that I can now send. I can put them on the SharePoint, and I can include this in my correspondence. Okay. So what I suggest we do then, Sharif, is that if you wanted to say something new about the point that you just raised, you could do it now, as well as the points that the email that you had sent us, and then and then we can go ahead. Okay, so we'll give the floor to Sharif first.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. Actually, I had some messages from several colleagues in the Chinese service saying that actually they can stay for a whole day or a half day without work, and this makes life very stressful for them, especially in the light of the new mandate that will double the problem. So actually they are worried about this, and they don't know how to keep with this, and I hope that we can find a response to this problem from the Chinese service and from the highest level of policy management in order to solve it. I can, if you'd like us to hear interactions of the management about this now before I proceed to the other points, that will be okay. If you'd like me to proceed, I can go. So you are chairing the meeting, you can tell
sure.
me.
No, go ahead. So let me go ahead and hand this particular point over to Cecilia, because in Geneva we don't have a training full-time training officer, and so I'll let Cecilia answer this particular point first. And other duty stations will add as if it arises. As I said, in Geneva, we certainly try not to have colleagues ever without any documents, and certainly staff need to actively interact with the programming officers. And if there is no work, they have the possibility of indicating this in their special assignments. And I will go ahead and it's on my to-do list to go ahead and take a look at the report. I have a report that I can generate as a manager as to who has no work and when they had no work, to try and do some data research on this, at least for Geneva. That's what I would certainly do. Let me give the floor to Cecilia.
Thanks. Good morning, good afternoon, colleagues. So in replying this to this question, Sheriff, I think first of all, it speaks very highly of the professionalism of the Chinese colleagues who are worried when they don't have work. I mean, I know that this is a very productive team, very hardworking, and I'm really glad, to hear that they are concerned about that, which is something that they have already shared with me. We have taken a few measures for this. I mean, this only happened in 2020, okay? Because the workload decreased and because the size of the team was fully staffed while other teams are not fully staffed. So then we had, one big team and other smaller teams, but we need to produce all the documents at the same time. We took several measures. The measures that we took were to try to bring more work, and Geneva colleagues provided us with a lot of work. Some of the work that it was done in Geneva that we couldn't bring, it was especially when it was very fast turnaround, for instance, some resolutions. But I think, that taking into consideration the concern of colleagues in the Chinese service, we should, Michelle, reconsider that decision and maybe bring additional work sharing for the Chinese colleagues. Another measure that we took is that the Chinese service increased quite dramatically the number of special assignments. In the Chinese service, we are now doing a lot of projects, polishing spot, doing more training, other initiatives. They are very strong in terminology, which is something that for Chinese is specifically very important, especially very important because of the transliteration, etc., etc. So this is also another measure that from the management we took to avoid having a decrease in productivity. Overall, if you see the data coming from all the services, yes, the Chinese service decreased the productivity, but it's not their fault, so they shouldn't be concerned. And this is something the chief is also very concerned, and I'm also talking to him and saying, don't worry, if there was no work, if we couldn't bring more work, we are not externalizing anything in other duty stations. We want to do it in New York, but you shouldn't worry if for 1 year we decrease the productivity. What is going to happen now is that we are beefing up the other teams. We are recruiting in Russian, French, and Spanish other colleagues. So now the teams are going to be bigger. So we will be able to absorb more work in the other services, and then we are going to be able to push more work in the Chinese service too. Besides that, what we anticipate is that maybe 2021 is not a year where we are going to have a lot of work because the meetings are not resuming, normally yet. But as soon as meetings are going, to be back normally, we will have more work. So just to let you know that this is not reflecting in the individual productivity of the staff. We are not, penalizing if somebody was doing, like they were doing 6 pages in 2019, and in 2020 they did 5.5 or whatever. It is fine. It's not their fault. But I'm very happy to hear that they are so professional as to raise this as an issue. Thank you.
Thank
thanks.
you.
Sorry, Michelle.
That's okay. Thank you, Sophia. Sorry. Thank you. Thank you, Cecilia. Sharif, if you wanted to respond, then we can go ahead and take a look at the comments that you had sent around to everyone.
I think
Yes.
that Xiaoxin wants to say something, who is also a Chinese service.
Okay, so Xiaoxin first, then Sharif.
You are mute. Xiaoxin, you are muted.
Sorry. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me now? Thank you. I think part of what I wanted to say earlier was already preempted by Cecilia, who answered the questions quite effectively. I just wanted to give a little bit of background of what I know about this Chinese. There's some downtime indeed, because the background was that, as far as I know, of course, Cecilia knew much better as the director of the division for documentation. I remember in 2018, the Chinese service receipt peaked. And then, at that time, they exhausted all the roster of LCE candidates were exhausted. So they took the whole year of 2018 to get a new roster of 30 people. So during that time, 2 of our colleagues, I think 2 or 3 colleagues from Nairobi, were lateral transferred quickly, so that to add to the workforce. Then, as soon as the roster got out, then the chief of the service replenished all the vacancies quickly, so that now they have almost full board, in the staffing table. So it so happened the document sort of being reduced quite substantially. So they have, that's why they have the discrepancy, they have the difference. Now we have been, like Geneva, been supporting, no, rather they have been supporting us in work share. So to a great deal. I quite understand, because also the chief of service used many innovative and ingenious ways to cope with this shortage of documents, so that to alleviate the impact, like organizing various lectures, terminology build up and training. I know that they're very effective. On the one hand, I quite understand their situation and sympathize with the situation, with the downtime with the staff in service. On the other hand, I also understand the senior management, because if you don't have the documents, then the cost, the comparative cost would be up. So just now, Cecilia mentioned the many effective measures. I think they would be very well to alleviate the problems, the impact. I think, hopefully, but this issue, I know there will be special measures, hopefully, taken, so that because this situation is quite unique, I should say. It's only for the Chinese, mostly the Chinese service, which is one of the, used to be one of the effective, efficient services in New York. So I just wanted to add my comment like that. Thank you.
Thank you, Xiaoxin. Sharif?
Thank you so much, Cecilia, and thank you so much, Xiaoxin, for the clarification. And I think that Cecilia said something good, which is work sharing with Geneva. I think this could be a very good solution, and I hope it can be done in the future. but I also want to reflect the concerns about for Chinese colleagues about their individual productivity, because they need to this time when they don't have work to be reflected in their GDoc as a productive time. For example, the programming officer can assign them other things like terminology, like training, so that they can fill in this gap, because that's what they are really concerned about, and I hope this will be taken into consideration. Now I want to turn to the points I want to raise in the last meeting. I will be brief. Just I will divide them into policy comments and technical comments. And I will start with technical points. I will read them in a brief manner. I have 8 points. The first one talks about the first 2 points talk about technology. It says that success of technological innovation should be measured first by the extent to which improved work-life balance for staff members. By this measure, little has been achieved. Another comment says that information technology comes with higher expectations. Uh, Thanks to information technology, higher standards are expected in terms of terminology, consistency, and use of references. To meet these higher expectations, a considerable amount of time is spent searching the necessary material, etc. These higher expectations have offset whatever little gains achieved on the work-life balance front. Uh, Technology is almost with no real effect on revision. Therefore, revision productivity needs to remain unchanged and out of any talk about productivity. That's a point raised by one of the revisor colleagues. Now we can talk about another technical point, sorry, is the fact that productivity of translators is closely dependent on the quality of English source submissions. Even edited texts have quality issues in terms of clarity and precision. Translators are required to mentally pre-edit the source text while translating, which is an added burden to the task of translation and self-revision. More often than not, editors just introduce unnecessary cosmetic changes that have no bearing on the text, and the translators spend credited hours introducing them in the translated texts. This is, I think, the end is of the technical points. And now I talk about the policy issues. The first question, why DGACM chose to send information on throughput while in reality the work of staff is measured in output productivity? That's a question. Another comment talks about the Joint Inspection Unit report on multilingualism. It says that the report is preparing the ground for a radical change in the conditions of employment of language staff, and encourages more use of external sources for translation and interpretation, following the example of subsidiary organizations such as FAO and WHO, while the UN should be the model here and to be led by others. Another also internal policy comment, the last one I think, is that this is a time when there is a talk about raising productivity and systematic evaluation. These are two new drastic requirements at once, whether you are the evaluator or the evaluee. Staff members should be allowed to work under one source of pressure only, either productivity or evaluation. Only when one requirement is successfully assimilated in the daily work can the burden of the other requirement be added to the basket. And I think that's the end of these points, which actually are not my own perspective. They are perspectives sent to me by several colleagues in my units, and I just relay them to the working group.
Thank you.
I hope I wasn't too long.
No, thank you, Sharif. I will let Cecilia answer the points that you have raised, the technological points, and then the policy points. And then I would like to address the paragraph that you are mentioning in the GIU report. And I will go ahead and put a link to the GIU report in the meantime while Cecilia's answering. I'll put it in the meeting chat and I'll cut and paste paragraph 66 as well. Cecilia, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Michelle. Thanks, Sharif, for the comments. So I'm going to go one by one. I think that from the version that I have, the only one that was not included was the one about editing. I will start with that one. Editing is an important step, especially in an organization where people write in English, but they are not native speakers. And you know, as the English version is one of the official languages and one of the working languages, so the English version must be very, very good, like all the other languages. So in the case of the editors, they are doing a very, very good job. I understand that for translators, it is not so fun. I mean, actually, it is very inconvenient to introduce the edited text, the changes of the edited text in their translations, but this is not the fault of the editors. It's the fault of the processes that we need to have in New York to be able to cope with the workload. Ideally, what we want to achieve is linear processing so that, you know, the editors do a very good job, and then we just translate, and we don't need to go back to for a second time. In order to do this, what we will need to do is like to change the size of our teams in the editing section, and to have more editors. This year we are experimenting, and last year too, we have been experimenting with this cross assignment where the Prezi writers in the English service are doing editing. And according to the feedback that I got from chiefs, but also from staff, this is already seen as a positive development. We have more linear processing. So in the future, I think that what we need to do is to beef up the editing capacity so that we can reduce the burden of introducing the edited text. But I wouldn't say that the changes introduced by the editors are cosmetic. These are changes that are needed to have a proper version in English. So then I'm going to go to the questions that I got in writing. One was that the translators have historically suffered from lack of work-life balance, as shown from different surveys at different times. Actually, this one, it all depends on the service, and the situation is not the same in the services. So I think that we should reflect why in some services there is a perception, and it's not even related to the levels of productivity. So I think that there are some dynamics, including some cultural dynamics and some expectations that are different from service to service. I think that the technology, you know, the goal of technology is to facilitate our work and to make our work better. But we also have a huge responsibility on how we use technology. And I think that, especially I'm speaking about my own experience as a translator, as a chief, and now as the director, you know, seeing the same issue from different perspectives. I think that we use technology actually in a way that was less effective, so that the technology was good and was effective, but that we overburden ourselves in our quest for perfection and for quality. We overburden ourselves too much, in particular in some cases. I mean, it's not generalized. I mean, there are a lot of people who are very good at managing their time, are using technology effectively, but I see that there is a sizable number of translators who actually have used technology to do more searches and to ask for more. And in my own experience, I remember when the bytexts were introduced in 2005, and we started, and even myself, I remember, now that I had this technology, I could check and double check the full sentence, the half a sentence, the quarter of a sentence, the 3 words, the 2 words, the 1 word. And I was doing this in order to make my translations better, to please the revisers. I think that we need to stop that. And I think that we have not been able to use technology effectively to make quick change, to make quick decisions. The work of a translator is to make decisions. Technology should help us making these decisions, but sometimes the machine is offering us so many options that we get lost. So we need to come up with a way of training ourselves to think as a group how we can be more effective and how we cannot be trapped in this overload of information that we are, having more information is something that all the translators are asking in GTEx project. All the requests for translators is to be able to add more indexes, to be able to add more terms, to be able to add more and more and more. And this, I think that we need to stop, we need to reflect, and we need to come up with internal standard operating procedures and a definition of quality, an understanding about revision, an understanding about training on how we can achieve work-life balance by having the right working method. We are going to have change management plan to have these reflections, to be able to actually leverage technology, because I agree with you that we haven't done that part, and probably this is where we should focus in order to achieve better work-life balance. Then let me see what else is here. That was for the technology comes with higher expectations. Then when we discuss translation costs, we are comparing with private providers. It's not the best way at looking at things. Well, we are not comparing to the private sector. We are comparing to the cost of the people that we are hiring to do our work. It's not that with all the private sector, because with all the private sector, it will be, the comparison, it will be even worse. We have a subset of people who are working for us, either as individual contractors or through translation agencies. And we are comparing to that, because this is when we talk about the cost per word, it is very easy to see what is coming from the internal workforce and what is coming from the external workflow that we use. And the reality is, and this is one of the big challenges, is how to justify the big gap. So the point is that this is something that we need to be mindful. And when I bring this topic into the discussion, is just as another element of the challenges that we have as translators when, it is easier than ever to calculate the cost of internal staff, the cost of external staff, and yes, and this may be, may lead to some conclusion that we don't, that we don't want to have, because it is important for us and member states. And I want to mention something. The size of our teams are established by member states. Okay, the administration makes a proposal, but it is the member states who decide, for instance, to add more Chinese translators, even if the administration didn't ask for them. So I think, colleagues, that going, to some these ideas of going to more external work for, like in other organizations, is not something that we can do from the administration. If it's coming, it will come from member states, not from us. Okay. Because they are the ones who take the decisions. Then we said we have like this, the technology has almost no real effect on revision. So, and then revision productivity needs to remain unchanged. I think we are, when we discuss the keeping the 12 pages for revisers, we didn't talk about technology, because I think that technology potentially can help a lot in revision. I don't think that we are using it effectively. Again, This is one of the things. We put the technology, we have the systems, but we didn't do the change in our working methods and our mindset as translators to actually leverage technology in revision. But I think, you know, that in what we put as a main reason for keeping revision at 12 pages is that now revisers are expected to play a pedagogical role in bringing the skills of junior recruits to self-revision during the probationary period, which can be 2 to 3 years. And this is the reason. It's not because technology doesn't help. On the contrary, I think that we should reflect how technology can help us revising better, faster, but that's not the point. The point in keeping the 12 pages is because we are asking revisers to be more of a mentor, of a coach, and to change, you know, this mindset of, okay, this is the way I would have put this sentence, into what are the main errors in this sentence. Are these changes that I want to do are real changes, are needed, or it's something that is a suggested change because I would have done this in a different way. So I think, let me see if I, okay, and this brings me to the point of that we are raising productivity, and in New York, we are also focusing on systematic evaluation. Yeah.
Cecilia, just before you go into that point, we had a question in the chat. If you could please give us an example of how technology can enhance revision.
Oh yeah, that's yeah, okay. When you are revising, I mean, you could have, you know, you have all the information of what the revisee has done in Iluna, okay? And we have revisers who actually take the revision, open the work of the translator in Iluna, and they can see, for instance, what the translator has used as a source. If the translator has used machine translation, what are the documents that Iluna has provided hyperlink and that the translator used? There is a wealth of information in Iluna for the reviser to use. So I think that in this case, if there is a huge missed opportunity yet that we can use in beefing up the quality of our revision. If I see, for instance, that a translator has used machine translation, first of all, this is something that it shouldn't be penalized, okay? If I know that somebody has used machine translation and the use of the machine translation is effective, as a reviser, I should, first of all, withhold my judgment that this is not a good translation, okay? Because we still have some colleagues with this mindset. If I read the English and in the Spanish is fine, I know that machine translation has been used. I will read this sentence from the perspective, okay, of trying to find the mistakes that machine translation maybe uses or maybe does, okay? Because we know what type of mistakes machine translation does. But having this in mind, I will read the sentence in English, I will read the sentence in Spanish, and I will do my revision faster because I will be alert and aware of what the revisee has done. If I find that a translator has used a previous document, okay? And this is where, and again, I think one of the things that, for instance, in the Spanish service, I always wanted to eliminate, and in other services too, is this verification mark that we use to inform the reviser what the translator has used. There is no need, it's already in Iluna. And this is the type of things that we are overburdening the translators unnecessarily, because Iluna has the information. Iluna tells you, this comes from UN term, this comes from another document, this comes from machine translation. And if I know that the translator has used a reference, I very easily know, I mean, I am a reviser, I know my job very well, I know the documentation cycle, I can see if the reference was, you know, the proper one. I can see if there was something else that maybe was more adequate. And I know, you know, that some colleagues are taking this from something that was done by a human being that may have problems. I need to read it, I need to revise, but I know that the problems that may have done there actually are different than from the problems of a segment coming purely from machine translation. At least I know that in the past, there was at least one human intervention and now a second human intervention by the revisee. Should I go?
Thank you. I just see that Karina had also asked for the floor, but before I give the floor to Karina, let me just say that the working group is recommending that revisions stay at 12 pages. Okay, yeah. So this is something where we agree with the proposal that is being made by staff representatives. So I just wanted to highlight that point that we are agreeing. Let me give the floor to Karina.
Thank you. I didn't plan to speak, but since we touched upon several issues that I wanted to cover anyway, I'll just briefly comment on those. First of all, thank you, Cecilia, for this explanation. And I'm really glad to hear that we are planning to move a little bit from the parallel processing towards linear processing. I know it's been a huge source of frustration for staff, as well as also inefficiency and duplicated efforts. So it's good to hear that there are plans to do that. And since you mentioned the editing, I just remember that in one of the surveys that I ran over the past year, I received multiple comments from our English colleagues. I know their nature of work is different from other services, and I just wanted to read one particular comment that touched upon this cross-assignment approach that was taken last year. So the person says that clear provisions are needed that recognize the fact that English translators are being asked to do a growing mix of jobs, including ones that they never applied for or wanted to do, ones they're still being trained to do, and that they also work out of multiple languages. It needs to be clearly recognized that the division hasn't come up with a satisfactory way to quantify the work done in ETS in a way that can be fairly compared to other services. ETS translators also get none of the benefits that the other language services get from editing, and generally benefit much less from the supposed developments in working methods and tools. To make it worse, editors are currently being forced to use Illuna editing, even though it is still under development, but are rarely allowed to claim lost time when the tool fails them, which is often. I just wanted to make sure that with this cross-assignment and bringing more editors into the editing team, which will allow us to switch to the linear processing rather than the parallel, staff are also aware of what they expected to do, and more training is implemented so that people who did not apply for editing positions in the first place, but who have to do that now, know exactly how to achieve what they are required to achieve. That's it from me. Thank you.
Thanks, Karina. So I will go with Karina's intervention, and then I continue with the questions by Sherif. I am very mindful that the work of the English service is different because they do pressy writing, and that we may have some issues in how we reflect the productivity calculation, although we are still, we have tasked the chief of the English service to come up with a new formula. But the reality is that the low productivity that they have in translation in the English service is because they don't have enough work, and because the pressy writing work is seasonal. And in normal times, we need to finish the summary records very fast, so we cannot spread them during the year, and we need to hire external capacity. So what happens in this case? So you have like an intense period of work in the English service where colleagues are doing pressy writing, okay? When we bring additional capacity to do these summary records very, very fast, and then the rest of the year, you have no or very little pressy writing and very little translation. And this will always show in the statistics, especially if we improve the way to reflect that. So when we talk about the productivity of the English service, what we show is how productive they were during the time that they were not doing pressy writing. And because they don't have too much work, that productivity is low. What shows if we are showing, for instance, that some of the services are having 7 pages productivity in New York, like recently in Spanish and in French, and we have a service that has 3.5. What do you read immediately? This service has too much people. They don't have enough work. And this is, colleagues, something that when we show, I ask, to remove the English service from the calculation of productivity, a couple of years ago, and I couldn't get that because I wanted to remove that from, a comparison that is very unflattering, okay? So during the time that they are supposed to do translation, there is not enough translation, okay? What are we going to do? To risk to lose that some member states could see at that and to risk to lose posts and to move posts into external capacity so that we just hire, for instance, external capacity, or we are going to change, the way we work, and we are going to bring assignments for things that these colleagues are fully prepared to do. So we have a staffing table in the English service that is underutilized during part of the year. And these people have the skills to do editing. Editing will benefit everybody. Everybody in the other 5 languages appreciate. So actually, I don't really think that it is a bad idea to have them doing editing and bringing these benefits to the organization and fully utilizing their time. I understand that for some of them, this may not be the ideal situation or kind of job, And again, this is, when you apply to a job, you also have a line there in the end of your duties, which is on any other task that the chief may want to assign you. So I think that it is proper usage of resources, and especially in 2020, we didn't have even summary records, okay? So in 2019, at the beginning of 2020, the situation, it was a little better because we hadn't funding to do Prezi writing with external assistance. So we just extended, the deadlines for the issuance of the summary records, but this is not something that we want to do forever, because if we produce summary records very late, somebody at some point will say, well, actually, we don't need them anymore. So I think that the challenge, Karina, is that our professions are changing. We have fixed teams. Things are, meetings are not being done now. They may come back in the future in different patterns. So how to adjust to that? And I understand that for some of our colleagues, this may not be the ideal situation, but it is the situation in which we are in. Moreover, now our examinations are combined examinations. Our examinations for translators, for Prezi writers, and for editors. One other thing, Karina, is that, Prezi writing in the past, when I came to the organization, and I know for a lot of colleagues too, was done in the different services. At some point, it was all brought to the English service because they have very little translation work to do. So this is part of an evolution of the profession of the English translators. And that is also happening in other organizations too. So that's, should I continue with the questions too?
Yes, please, because I still want us to have time to talk over the proposals from last time that we haven't had time to look at. And I'd like to keep some time at the end to where we go in the future.
Okay, so this is about the evaluation in New York. Colleagues, we always have the pressure on quality, isn't it? This is what we are here for. This is what we can justify. Okay, we are way more expensive than the translation agencies and that's the individual contractors, but we are very, 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 very good. So the pressure on quality, I don't think that this is a pressure, it is a requirement. And to evaluate that is part of what we need to do to ensure that our translations are very good quality. Very, very often, you know, I hear this, oh, the administration doesn't care about quality. But the moment that we put an evaluation form, some of our colleagues, and not all of them, some of our colleagues contest that this is needed. Why this is needed now more than in the past is because now we expect colleagues to achieve self-revision status during the probationary period that can be 2 to 3 years, okay? In order to ascertain that and to bring like a fair measure, okay, so that nobody can claim, oh, the chief hates me, this is why I'm not getting, you know, self-revision. We are going to have a professional way of assessing quality where we also are operating a cultural change where the revisor cannot do any change that he or she may want to do, but the changes that are useful to build the capacity of the translator to become a productive self-reviser. So the pressure for quality, I don't think that is a pressure. It's a requirement. It's something that is embedded in the way that we are expected to work, and to showing this in every document is part of what we are all here and what we need to do. These evaluations in New York will also help us to assess if the revisers are doing this, if the revisers are penalizing unnecessarily the translators for, you know, suggested changes, if they are not identifying actually the important things, but they are lost in the little details that doesn't make any sense. I think that Rima, who has been participating in the as the chief, because this is coming from the chief, but it's also coming from a reflection group that we had in New York about how quality is perceived, because we talk a lot about quality, but we don't really have a definition of quality framework, and this is what we are trying to achieve now. This is, and in the, if you read the budget for 2022 for New York, there is also a mention that we are going to work towards establishing internal quality controls for P4s and P5 using this same evaluation form, so that we have, you know, very well documented paths of how quality is achieved at the individual level and then as a group at the service level. Thank you. Rima.
Yes, thank you. Just to follow up on what Cecilia said. First of all, colleagues, staff representatives, I would like to point that you are representing all the staff. So that means that you are representing also a huge number of colleagues who are achieving the productivity and go beyond the productivity. The statement that says that, you know, oh, productivity and quality cannot go together, or even the assumption that, you know, in order to do quality, we need to do less productivity. I think it's a little bit a lack of mindfulness, you know, to all the colleagues who are doing both. I already mentioned before in another intervention that typically what I see is that, you know, lower productivity does not always go with higher quality. I would say it's exactly the opposite. So the statement that says, oh, you know, we need to do less productivity in order to do higher quality, I would say this is not true. And anyway, it is not true in probably a lot of cases. That's my first remark. Second, regarding the evaluation, staff representatives from New York who are here, remember that they are the ones who came up with all the complaints about how the services are doing evaluations without any criteria, how we moved from translation under revision to self-revision, and there are no criteria for this. And the services are doing, you know, all kinds of, you know, stuff that are not legal, that are not right. Nobody knows, you know, how people move. So this is the proposal of the staff representatives in DD, and the reflection group they chose themselves and constituted, and in which recommendation they asked for us to find a unified method to evaluate and to determine how staff members will move from translation under revision to self-revision. Now I am quite surprised to hear that we no longer like this, and now evaluation is becoming, you know, an additional burden. I would like to remind you also that evaluation existed in almost all services long time before. Nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. The evaluation now is done systematically. The evaluation is done now according to criteria that was published, circulated to all staff. We are doing an extra effort to make sure that this is done the right way, that everybody is aware of what we are doing, including the translators under revision. So as far as I'm concerned, for the moment, I am not sure, you know, I mean, where all of a sudden all those problems are coming from about the pressure and about, you know, whether we do evaluation or productivity. Never we had somebody who moved up or who got an enhanced assignment because of the number of pages they do. The number of pages that has to go with high quality. This is the criteria for self-revision, and it was applied with evaluation or without evaluation. So I really would like to caution everybody about, you know, saying that people who are productive are not producing good quality, because that is not true. Thank you.
Thank you, Rima. I see that Sharif has asked for the floor and Karina has asked for the floor, but we're not going to be able to finish the points that Sharif had discussed. What I would suggest is that the question of systemic evaluation of quality should be something perhaps that you could raise further with Cecilia, because the systemic evaluation for quality is a model that is being rolled out in New York at the present time. As Rima has explained, this is something that came from staff in New York. It's a methodology that's been developed in New York by New York for New York staff, and it was my understanding that this was going to be piloted. And as Cecilia's pointed out, this is for the 2022 budget. So I'd really like us to try and focus again on the things that we are working on now. So is that okay with the people who had asked for the floor now, Karina and Sharif?
Can I have the floor?
Yes, but my point was that if you want to talk about the quality evaluation, I
agree with you.
Okay, yeah. Good. Then go ahead.
I agree with you, Michelle, that we need to bring these kinds of discussion internally. I'm not raising them for the sake of dissecting them now in this meeting, just because I'm just in this meeting. My intervention, I can give it the title Staff Perspectives. These are the perspectives I got from staff, and it is, in all honesty, it is my duty to convey them, regardless of whether I agree or disagree with them. So I just wanted to bring them to you. And I agree with what Rima said, that we in the reflection group, it is we who asked for this, and we appreciate the fact that the management responded to our request and is starting to do this. But just I got this comment from a colleague who might be under huge stress trying to evaluate stuff, and at the same time do translation, maybe he was frustrated. But it's in all honesty, I have to bring his own stressed feelings to you, and then it's up to you guys to do whatever you like. I just have like couple of comments of what Cecilia said. I will say them very briefly. One thing is that concerning the English, I think this is the English text, I think it's a very important topic, and I'm not here actually to bring any blame to our colleagues in the English service. Cecilia, of course, you know better than me about their quality of their work, but actually I got several complaints from staff about the quality of the edited text. So please, I would like this issue to be brought up to internally for more discussion. to see actually which sides are. I'm not giving any value judgments about their quality. Another last intervention about a policy issue regarding what has the comparison with the private sector and the noble mayor principle. I just to have a question for Cecilia about how can you reconcile reducing cost at the division and at the same time maintaining the competitiveness of the organization and the common system, as it is clearly stated in the Noble Air principle that the common system should retain its competitiveness in comparison with other international organizations outside the system. I hope that the question makes any sense at all. And if any, please, I need your, I'd appreciate it if you can clarify. Thank you so much.
Well, what I would say is that in terms of the Noble Mayor principle keeping its competitiveness, United Nations staff are paid much more than translators who work for international translation agencies and large corporations. I mean, that's the point that I would like to say. And that when Cecilia was making the comparison as to the procurement contracts that we do with translation agencies, where procurement, where basically we do a request for process, and translation agencies bid for the because they want to translate United Nations documentation. They do so, and they're the ones who set the price. And then we do an evaluation of best value for money and select the best translation agencies when we work. So that's the process and how it works. And it has nothing to do with the Noble Mayor principles that compares international, as you say, civil service and companies, because we are compared to the United States civil service and the the United States civil service and federal service. But did you want to add something on that, Cecilia?
Sorry, I got disconnected. No, I think that is good, Michelle. I hear what you said, that it was perfect. Thank you.
Okay, I see Maite would like to say a few words.
Thank you, Michelle. First, I'm very sorry. I hope that I'm not going to repeat things or ask questions because I've again, connection issues, so I might have lost some information. First, I'm not sure that I've heard us saying that all translators who produce more produce bad quality. I think we're saying that producing more in general has the risk of decreasing quality, which is a fact. I mean, and I did not really appreciate the comment on talking in the name of people who go above and beyond, what they're supposed to do. I mean, it doesn't matter. I mean, it's not relevant in this discussion, but I've gone above and beyond for years, and it doesn't change my point of view that I mean, sometimes if you produce more, you take that risk, and it's a risk that you're willing to take. Also, to answer to that intervention, the stick is not always necessary, because as you all mentioned, overall, we translators have been producing more than what we're supposed to do. So it means that we are professionals and we don't need that stick. Also, while I perfectly understand your job as managers, we are also there to protect staff interest and well-being, and increasing the workload, as you know, it's not gonna make it any easier. So again, we're here to protect the staff and to ensure that their views and concerns are taken into consideration. Another point that I want to make is that what is being done in other organizations or in the private sector is not necessarily the right way. We've seen it with, how's it called, hot desking or something. I mean, or the open plan thingy. I mean, we've adopted this much later than everybody else, when actually studies had shown that it was not productive. So it's not necessarily a guarantee that is the right way. I think I do remember that some organizations have actually dissolved their translation services and then came back to their original model. And the last thing I want to say, and this is specific to Nairobi, and we're not here to discuss specificities, but we have specificities, is that the parallel processing thing, I'm not sure how it would be done in Nairobi. While I know that our management is concerned about that topic, I'm not sure how it's going to be handled, but we work differently than other duty stations. So again, that is something that we need to take into consideration. And also the problem of quality is that if we take the risk of decreasing quality, for Nairobi, for example, it's also an issue because we have XB clients, and while I mean every client needs to get the quality that they're paying for, we're relying on the fact that we provide a better service than the private sector, and so that would be something that also we need to take into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Maite. I think that it's Azucena has asked for the floor, so I'm going to give the floor to Azucena and ask her if she can be brief if possible, because I would like us to address the questions that our colleagues have raised from Doris, and I will do my best to be very concise about addressing the question about the JIU. Over to you, Azucena.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, just a very, very small point. Quality versus quantity, or quality and quantity. We always hear the same, discussion, and I think we really lack data on this. Whatever we can say, we take a risk on quality if we increase productivity, or the contrary. This has to be substantiated by data. And even as chief, I've tried to figure out whether there was a decrease in quality, for instance, over the last year, because we had also to do more with less. It's very difficult, and this is why one of the recommendations of the working group is also to establish, I don't know if we talked about that, focus group on quality, so that we really go into this subject area, look at the risk, look at what we can do to preserve quality, and this will be a discussion among chiefs. So chiefs will have also, they will be empowered to really reflect on quality issues. So I think we can really respond to this concern with this focus group. Thank you.
Thank you, Azucena. So with respect to the JIU report on multilingualism that Sharif was mentioning, I have put a link to the JIU reports here in the chat, so that those of you who are interested can see it. And when you take a look at the report, I'd like to point out that paragraph 66 is actually a paragraph about interpretation, and it's not a paragraph about documentation. It's not a paragraph about documentation staff. The recommendation that the executive head, that the JIU is making, is the one that I've pasted into the chat right here, which is the executive heads of the United Nations systems that have not yet done so, should where appropriate introduce or enhance by the end of 2022 their policies for attracting new translators and interpreters and retaining talented and skilled language professionals, including the preparation of succession plans with specifications for required languages and language combinations, as well as the expansion of outreach programs. So the JIU is not recommending a change of the conditions of employment of language staff. And what I would like to point out as to the paragraph more specifically about interpretation, and organizations such as the Food and Agriculture Organization, which I know well, because before my current job, I was the chief of interpretation at the Food and Agriculture Organization. The reason why they don't have more staff interpreters is because they don't have enough work to keep them busy year-round. And what the Food and Agriculture Organization has, and what ICAO also has, is they have a profile called, and OPCW has this profile as well, which is called an interpreter/translator or a translator/interpreter. And what is expected is that when there are meetings, the interpreter will interpret, and when there are no meetings, the staff member will translate. This is the kind of profile that I had and that I held throughout my career before I became a manager in 2007. So I just wanted to point that out. So if anyone asks you about the GIU report in paragraph 66, you can say that it is about interpretation and not about translation. And the recommendation is actually that CEB members should hire more language staff, not switch to working contractually. So that's what I wanted to say about the GIU report on multilingualism. Let me now go back to the document and the staff reps proposals from the date of the 4th of March. So far, we had spent 3 sessions discussing those. And so let me go back to the proposals that we had not been able to finish during our last meeting. So in the proposal that we have for proposal number 1, proposal Roman numeral 1, there were 3 proposals in that batch. One of them is that a legal opinion be requested from OLA as to whether the GA resolution can be properly interpreted to contain a mandate to increase the current self-revision rate. We have shared with you the information, the document from 1999, that when we're talking about the workload standard, the original document from the ACABQ included translation, self-revision, and revision. And we have shared with you that the resolution talks about workload standard of translation services, doesn't just talk about translation. And we've also shared with you that Mr. Abellion has specifically asked us to address the question of self-revision. I have taken note, and so have my colleagues, about the point that there is, that we have not been able to find data to justify why self-revision was put at a higher standard in 1999. I suspect that the reason why the department suggested a change to self-revision was because most colleagues who were working in self-revision mode were experienced colleagues, and that the standard that had been proposed was one that they frequently exceeded. And this is why I believe that there was this proposal, but we will continue to try and look through the archives to see if we can find any information. And the considerations colleagues had mentioned that they had said that we have not provided any data as to whether translators can produce 6.4 pages per day. And actually my colleagues from New York can confirm, it's my understanding that many self-revisers, I don't know the exact numbers, but that many self-revisers in New York meet or exceed the 6.4 pages per day. So that's what I wanted to say about the first 2 points that we had there. And what I would like to say is that what we will certainly do is that we've discussed the idea of a gradual implementation. And this is something that we will continue to monitor and review consistently as we take into account what leverage exactly is brought forth through technology. And when we speak about this workload standard, we have to be mindful that they're not talking about increasing the workload standard because of Iluna. They're talking about the increase in the workload standard compared to the pre-computer era, to the time when people had to work with paper dictionaries, had to go to the library to do research, and references were cut and paste. So Iluna is one component, but it is not the only component. It's much easier to translate and to move your sentence around, to cut and paste and to do all of that kind of work than it is to write something, cross it out, rewrite it, or type it again. And I do know that many colleagues also used to use dictation in the past, And this is one of the reasons why there is dictation features enabled within Iluna, and we are mindful of the fact that in some languages, the dictation feature is not as good as we would like it to be, and that many people prefer to type because they can type faster than it would take them to correct the dictation. So that's what I wanted to point out about those two, the first two proposals. And we are very, the health, morale, well-being, and work-life balance of staff are something that are very important to us, regardless of whether there's COVID or whether there is no COVID. This is something that is of great concern to us, and it is something that we will continue to monitor and continue to review. The third proposal that the staff representatives had said was either to postpone or delay the implementation of a higher self-revision standard while working conditions due to the pandemic continue to be suboptimal, or to propose the implementation of a smaller increase and only on a tentative experimental basis. We thought about these proposals and they were discussed within the working group as to whether we could have a single workload standard for all staff, and we've discussed that already as to why that option was discarded. We discussed the idea of having a tiered approach where we would have a certain amount of increase for 1 year and then a subsequent increase the year afterwards. And since over 50% of staff in the department meet or exceed the 5.8 productivity, it was felt that it was better to just go ahead with the implementation as of the 1st of April. If member states asked us what we have done, we will be able to say that we have implemented the workload standard and that we have taken into account the personal circumstances of staff, which will require individual conversations between staff and their FROs in order to have conversations about performance as to what type of increase is going to be realistic. With the new performance evaluation system, I expect that the new broadcast should come out the week of the 22nd of April. There's going to be proposals that first reporting officers meet more frequently with their staff. And certainly within my duty station in Geneva, we will discuss as to whether first reporting officers should meet with their staff possibly as often as every month, in order to ensure that staff understand that we appreciate their work, that we appreciate their perseverance, and that what we are discussing are the efforts and the way we may have to change our work, and the way many staff will have to change their work in order to achieve this workload standard. So this is where we are with respect to the three proposals that we had not been able to discuss last time. Let me ask my colleagues of the working group if they would like to take the floor, and then I will give the floor to staff representatives if they would like to add something else. Okay, so no one is asking for the floor now, but let me just go to the chat, because I see that I was pinged quite a bit. So I see that there was an exchange between Maite and Cecilia, and so I'd like to invite everyone to go ahead and read that. And Sharif has asked Cecilia, why did DGACM choose to send information to throughput, while in reality the work of staff is measured in output productivity? This question has been answered several times during the information sessions. But Cecilia, let me hand over to you to say it again.
Very simple.
Thank you.
Very simple, Sharifa. When we started getting this pressure from member states a couple of years ago to increase the productivity, where they were proposing the increase in productivity to 6 pages. Actually, we, from the management, we wanted to show member states that we were already there, so that they couldn't, by increasing the productivity to 6 pages, decrease our budget by 20%, which was apparently the intention, according to the USG of the member states. So this means that the change was done to show the best possible picture of the department, of the work of the translators, to avoid actually, having a decrease in the budget that would be extremely damaging, because we were already doing 6 pages. So you see, if we had like a 20% budget reduction, we will be like in an extremely bad situation, and we will be like doing, you know, not 6 pages, but 7 pages. Thank you.
Thank you, Cecilia. Doris?
Yes, thank you. So if you could please confirm that the working group has already made a final decision as to what it is going to recommend to the USG?
So we're in the process, Doris, of drafting the recommendations. So the recommendations were the ones that I communicated to you in our first email. These were the ideas that we had presented to Mr. Abellion to validate our thought process and our reflection, and to make sure that we were going in the right direction. Now that we have consulted with you, we will go ahead and draft the recommendations. So several of the recommendations have been drafted. For example, the one about creating the focus groups, and that has been shared with all chiefs of section in all of the duty stations. The one about recommending an evaluation on authoring is one that has been shared with DMS and evaluation at all duty stations and with all chiefs of section. The one about authoring is the one that also includes editing, secretariat, non-secretariat documents, parallel processing, and so on and so forth. The one about the pilot project about reprise using Eluna leverage is one that has been shared also with DMS and with all chiefs of section. The recommendation about the increase of productivity has not been shared with outside of the working group yet, because we were waiting until we had finished our consultations with you to share that particular recommendation. And so once we will finish, we will wrap up today's meeting, then that's what I will be working on this weekend. And then there will be a more general paper that will include all of the recommendations as attachments, with more like an executive summary. And that document will be shared with Mr. Abellion for him to decide. It will be his decision as to what into what way we proceed. And what I will be doing is that, as I explained, we have the one recommendation, but we also told you about the other scenarios that we had discussed, which is the 5.8 pages, and which is the one about the tiered or a staggered implementation. And I will be going through all of the comments that you have made in the proposals, and I will see wherever I can to integrate them in the comments, indicating staff comments, so that USG Abellion understands what the feedback was staff was with respect to some of the ideas that we have put in place. We will also be putting the summaries of today's meeting, once they're complete, and the ones from last week on the SharePoint site for everyone, for staff and everyone to be able to read. And then, of course, we will continue to engage with everyone, because writing the paper, I don't want to say that writing the paper and this consultation process is the easiest part, because it was not easy and it was a lot of work. It was a lot of work for everyone, but actually the implementation that's going to follow through is going to be a lot of additional work as well. And it's going to involve a lot of conversations and consultations with the chiefs of section who are going to be implementing this, as well as cascaded discussions with sections. I will certainly go to meet every section within my service. In Geneva, where 75% of the staff do not meet the new workload standard, we're going to have to look at how we can change our work. I do not plan on asking staff in the languages service to work 16% more hours to their current work. So that means that if we're not going to do 16% more hours, that means that we're going to have to change some of our working methods. And I expect that some of the suggestions will be coming from staff, because staff are the ones who use Eluna every day. I don't use Eluna every day. And so I'm certainly counting on staff to give suggestions and to feed into this process. I'm hoping that the pilot project is going to feed into the process, and I'm hoping that my chiefs will also have ideas as to the process, and so that's important. Did you want to say?
Yes,
Yes,
I
of
would
course.
like to say something else. So if you're saying that 75% of staff in Geneva, I don't know how many staff in Vienna and probably many staff also in New York are not producing 6.4 pages a day of self-revision, and that it will take time for those staff members to, achieve that standard. That's the best reason to not implement this increase right away as of the 1st of April of this year. So it's hard for me to really understand the reason behind the decision.
Sure. Let me explain. The member states, the General Assembly has voted to increase the workload standard. So the workload standard has been increased. So my responsibility as the Chief of Languages Service here at the United Nations Office at Geneva, when they ask on the supplementary information what my workload standard is going to be, I'm hoping that my workload standard is going to be above 5.8. I mean, when we take a look at the figures that we had for Geneva for last year, I think our figures as a service were more or less at 5.6, 5.7. 3 of my sections meet the workload standard, but individuals do not meet the workload standard. It's my understanding that in New York, approximately 15 staff only out of more than, is it 150 staff that you have in, 300 staff in New York?
300 translators.
Yeah. So out of 300 translators in New York, it's my understanding that only 15 do not meet the workload standard. Let me give the floor to Cecilia for her to add a few points.
Yeah, thank you, Michelle. Colleagues, we have a mandate. The mandate is there. It needs to be implemented. We did the research about the history of the workload standards and how this has evolved in the decisions of the member states. So now our responsibility is how we are going to implement it. What is in our area of influence that we can use to implement this mandate in a way that doesn't decrease the work-life balance of our colleagues or the job satisfaction. So this is why we are thinking about, okay, if, the workload standards are 5 pages since the pre-computer era, and now we have machine translation, now we have Iluna, now we have automatic identification of symbols, that we have this and that, I mean, all what we have, okay? And we still are struggling is because we are doing something wrong in how we are working, in how we are using technology. This is our area of influence. The management is not saying to anybody, as Michelle says, okay, you need to work 16% more. It's like you need to be able to do in the time that you have, in the 8 hours that you are working, you need to be able to achieve this by changing the way you work. So I think, that in the working group, we are being mindful of all the feedback coming from our colleagues, but we are also very mindful that this is a mandate that we cannot just stop. So what we have discussed? Well, how we can change the way we use technology, how we can organize our services better. And especially, I think that what we need to, what we have for this implementation period, for this initial period, we have suspended in the recommendation the discount of reprise, because we know that, for instance, in Vienna, you have 18% reprise that is actually discounted in 2020, not with Iluna, not with anything. So your teams in the evaluation team in DMS in Vienna have discounted 18% of the production. By putting this full credit, so you will reach, the 16% increase. This is in our area of influence. The mandate comes from the General Assembly, we need to respect it. How we are going to do this internally? Okay, during 1 year, we are not going to count reprise, to give you the opportunity, to adjust, but at the same time and in parallel, we totally need to change the way we work if we don't want to overburden colleagues. And this is where I see the resistance of some of our colleagues. They want to keep doing the same thing. But if you want to keep doing the same thing, then you will need to work 1 hour or 2 hours more. And this is not what the managers want you to do. What we want all together to do is to reflect how we can achieve the mandate in a way that it is also acceptable from the perspective of job satisfaction. And for that, we need to work all together to come up with new ideas. Thank you.
Thank you, Cecilia. For example, one of the things that the chiefs are going to be doing in Geneva is that next week we're going to do a mini retreat online, unfortunately, but we're going to think about what kind of training and support we think would be useful for staff. We will also be reaching out to staff to ask them what kind of training and support they think they will be needing, and it's something that we need to take a look at. And some conversations that we will need to have as managers as well is, well, what exactly does gradual mean? You know, gradual means that we need to start seeing an increase, and this is something that we're going to have to discuss and that will be adapted. There will be the general policy, which is that there needs to be a gradual increase, and then there will be the individual performance management of individual staff as to what can be achieved within the staff, but the sections will be accountable for their sections, just as I'm accountable for the service. Doris, I think, and then Cecilia.
Yes, thank you. So since this seems to be the last meeting that you are going to have with staff, I would like to make a statement as follows, that we as staff representatives or consultants acting on behalf of staff.
Hold on,
Yes.
1 second. What the last point on today's agenda was the way forward, okay? And so what I wanted to discuss with you before we complete the process was I wanted to say that what we were thinking of doing as to the way forward is that I would write my weekly communication to staff on Friday. I will upload the summaries of all of the discussions with staff representatives on the SharePoint site. I was going to suggest that we have an information session on the 31st of March to make sure that all of this is so that we can inform staff of the outcome of the process, as well as answer any questions that we have. And we will also in the process finalize our document that we will be sending to USG. And so I have any questions is with respect to the way forward. Do you have any suggestions or comments about the way forward first? And then I'll give you the floor to read the closing statement.
I have some comment regarding the way forward.
Okay.
I think that the way forward, we have to get ready for the age of post-editing of machine translation content. We have to be brave enough to admit this. And in order to be ready, that I see that there are trends that show that we are entering this age, especially we have discussed before that the possibility that the recycled text will not be credited in the future. And this means actually that we are entering this age. So we have to actually to change our view of translation and to have a wider view of translation. We look at it both as an art, as a science, as a business activity. Of course, it's not an exact science, but it is a liberal art at the same time. In this spirit, we need to stop thinking in absolutist terms about translation and put everything in its relative context. So we need also to stop thinking of staff versus management, because we are all staff and we are all trying to solve the same problem we have today. So we need to address, there are major constructs which we need to address. I look at the thing as the relationship between staff and management as workers and the tool providers. Just we are the workers, and the management is those who provide the tools, like a factory owner. So these tools have to be working to function properly in order for the workers to achieve the goal that the management wants. I understand that the management is doing its best to polish the tools and to improve them. We cannot deny that there is much improvement on the tools, but still we need more tools. Still we need more improvement, especially in three major tools, which are training, terminology, and technology. And I believe that we always take some of these tools for granted because we consider them as part of translation, but actually they are not. For example, training, a good translator or revisor cannot necessarily be a good trainer. So we need training for the trainers. A good translators cannot necessarily be a good terminologist because terminology is a completely independent science, although it is closely related to translation. So we need to address these tools we have and try to polish them in a new and fresh light without repeating our old notions about such tools. I think if we put our heads together in this regard, in the way forward, and recognize the changes in our profession at the global level, not just at the organization level, we will come up with more creative solutions to all the issues we are addressing. And thank you. I hope I haven't been long.
No, you haven't. Thank you, Sharif. I really appreciate the suggestions that you're making as to discussions that need to on the way forward. I agree with you that we need to start having conversations of, revision of machine translation or post-editing, depending on whatever terminology you want to use. And I also think that maybe we need to start having conversations as to what do we expect the technology is going to look like in 5 years? What do we expect the technology is going to look like in 10 years' time? And I think that these are important conversations, especially for colleagues who are younger than I am. I'm 54. In 10 years, I'm going to be 64. And I think it's important to have these conversations for colleagues who are younger than I am, who are going to be working for many more years after 5 years and 10 years. And I would welcome the opportunity, whether it's within this working group or some other mechanism that is put in place, to start having these conversations. Thank you, Sharif. Cecilia, did you want to say something, or should I give over to Doris?
Give to Doris is going to make the final statement, isn't it?
Yes.
So I will say something. So I will say regarding the comments by Doris and also by Sharif. We are in a point in time where the only way forward we have is to change how we work, because we have different challenges. Things now are different. But we have a lot, I mean, I always think that translators, we are all, very smart people. We are all very well read. We are very, very creative too. So I think that we have there, for instance, some a lot to gain by putting all our heads together and start doing things differently. I think that in this process, if I want to highlight one thing, is that we are starting this process of change by having these very open discussions and by taking, into consideration different perspectives. And I really like how Sharif put that the role of managers is to provide the tools. And the tools are not only the computers, but also, our working methods and how we organize ourselves. I think that this was a very, very smart definition of what a manager is. And, one of the things that also was highlighted during this process is that if we all talk together, we can reach, to this. We all have the same goal. I mean, both here in the management, from the management and from the staff, we don't want to overburden anybody. We all want to keep doing a good job. We all want to have work-life balance, and we can achieve this by working together. I want to also clarify, when we talk about discounting reprise, or when we talk about other topics, it was never our intention, to punish anything. I mean, and reprise is always being credited and will always be credited as revision, because this is what it is. Sharif also brings other areas where we need to work more, for instance, on the training on how to use effectively machine translation. And I think that this discussion about the translation quality evaluation in New York is also part of this change in how we approach the training, how we approach revision, how we approach collaboration in general, which is an area where we haven't, all these tensions between revisers and translators. Why is that? I mean, we all, both parties want the same. Both parties are staff members. So this is, I welcome the comments about how we can work together, both from the management and from the staff, in order to make these changes that are going to allow us to tackle the challenges that are outside our influence by using what, by rethinking what it is in our area of influence. Thank you.
Thank you, Cecilia. Over to you, Doris.
Thank you. Okay. We wanted to say that we do appreciate the opportunity we've had to participate in these informal discussions and exchange views on a variety of issues that affect the conditions of work of staff in the translation services of the 4 duty stations. We were sincerely hoping that the working group, in drafting the final text of its recommendations to the USG, would take into account the views and concerns expressed by staff. But unfortunately, we are disappointed to see that some of our concerns have not been really reflected in the final recommendations that seem to be exactly the same that were announced on the first day of this process. So we would like to reiterate in particular our strong opposition to any proposal to recommend an immediate 16% increase in the self-revision workload standard, which not only has not been mandated by the General Assembly, but would go beyond any reasonable limits of managerial discretion by unilaterally imposing a contractual change and seriously undermining our conditions of work. We will be briefing our respective unions and seeking their advice on how to proceed from here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doris, for your statement. I will, if you can go ahead and send it to me, I will certainly include the exact wording of the statement and all of the statements that you have given, either as annexes as well as quotes in the body of the text and the recommendations. I really want
May I ask a question?
Yes.
Yeah, it's two things. So that means that this is a statement from Vienna, this is a statement from all the 4 duty stations. That's one question. Then the other one is, this is a statement that you only complain about the self-revision. This is the only part that you don't agree?
This is a statement that we have come up with among the group of the 5 representatives that have taken part in this group, and we all agreed to this statement. That was one question. And could you repeat again the other question, please? Oh, okay. And if this is the only thing that we are complaining. No, I said in particular, there might be other issues, and that's why we would like to consult with our unions, because this is not like the final word of all the unions. We are just 5 people who were appointed by our respective unions to participate in this meeting, but it's not like we have the final authority, to make any final statements on behalf of everybody.
Can you please read the sentence about the particular self-revision?
We would like to reiterate in particular our strong opposition to any proposal to recommend an immediate 16% increase in the self-revision workload standard, which not only has not been mandated by the General Assembly, but would go beyond any reasonable limits of managerial discretion by unilaterally imposing a contractual change and seriously undermining our conditions of work.
And what is the contractual change that we are?
A change in the terms of our contracts.
But can you elaborate a little bit?
No, I would rather give the opportunity to the heads of the unions to elaborate on that, because they should need time to really give a full explanation of this statement.
Yeah, but you come up with this statement. So in which sense do you think that increasing the self-revision rate is, we already have a 10%, isn't it more? In which sense it changes the working condition? I just want to understand, Doris, I mean, what is the rationale here? I understand that more is going to come, but this, we have 5 and 5.5, then we have 5.8 and 6.4. What kind of change in the conditions of work for the self-revisers is? Maybe out of the record, if you want to do it out of the record. I just want to understand why this is a change in the working conditions, but not for the translators, or not for this.
No, Cecilia, I would rather, give the staff unions the opportunity, because they are really the most experienced and knowledgeable in terms of staff regulations and rules and all of the processes, that have to do with our work.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doris. And I just wanted to make sure that we understand that from a procedural perspective, I will include the exact wording that you have said, Doris, in the recommendations that we make for the Undersecretary General, and that we are not the ones making the decision, that we are making the recommendations, and it will be up to the Undersecretary General to review and approve, and then proceed after that. So that's what I wanted to say. Before I close and I wrap up the session, first of all, I would like to thank all of the staff representatives, those who have been elected as staff representatives, those who have been appointed as staff representatives, and those who have volunteers to represent staff representative. It was very clear to me that what you are doing is that you are being the spokesperson, you are speaking on behalf of all staff, and that you have done as much as you can, taking into account your other responsibilities to bring together the information that was presented to you in a professional, clear manner. So I want to thank you for all of your efforts and work in that respect. I would also like to thank the extra chiefs who have joined the working group at the end, so that they could be as part of this consultative process, so that we could have not only a better linguistic balance of the different sections and work that is done within the organization, as well as bringing different perspectives, including that a better gender balance to our working group. And then finally, I'd like to thank the representatives of the original working group as part of all of their efforts in this regard. And as I said, our work is not over. Even when we hand over the recommendation, our work will not be over. But if there's one thing that we are all united by, is by a sense of perseverance and the noble work of the United Nations and how we contribute to the values of the organization. I do agree with Sharif that managers and staff are the same. I pay my dues to the staff unions, as do many other staff representatives. I see Cecilia raising her hand. She pays dues to the staff union as well. And we all have a role to play. We all have a role to play in what it is that we do. So once again, thank you. I continue to further engagement in this process. As I said, we're at the beginning of a process. We are not at the, this process is not ending just with the finalization of the recommendations. And I look to further engagement with staff representatives, either by duty station here in Geneva or collectively as a group. I think that now that we've put in place this mechanism with MS Teams and meetings of all 4 duty stations, I would welcome further opportunities to do so. Cecilia Zarid, thanks to everyone, saying although this was not a pleasant exercise, it was great to have the opportunity to discuss about our profession and the current challenges. And if we were meeting in person, we would probably go to dinner or have coffees on the side. And so I would certainly like to encourage staff representatives from my duty station or other staff representatives, don't hesitate to ping me if you want to have a further call or a conversation or discussion about anything in this area or in future areas. Thank you very much, and I will now say goodbye to everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Goodbye.